Om Sarvadharma Sthapakatvam Sarvadharma Swarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaaya Te Namaha. O establisher of all the faiths, embodiment of all the religions, the greatest teacher among all the teachers, O Sri Ramakrishna, my salutations to you. Namaste, Pranam. There is no end to suffering of the devotees. Howsoever great a devotee may be, the devotee has to suffer. Whatever blessings, whatever grace the Divine Mother, the Lord showers on the devotee has to undergo the pains and grief and misery and undergo the sufferings of this life. Sri Ramakrishna was referring to his visit to a family in Calcutta, family by name Malik. This particular branch of the family of Malik was so poor. They were financially in a very straitened circumstances. But still, this family was the worshipper of Mother Simhavai. Their house was in a bad shape. It was a dilapidated house. The family was not able to maintain their house properly. There was so much of a collection of moss on the walls and the floor, the pigeon droppings all around, the plaster of the walls was coming down. They were not able to maintain the place at all. But still, they were worshipping the goddess Simhavini in that house. And wonder of wonders, Sri Ramakrishna says, when he went and saw that worship, the face of the goddess, the face of goddess was radiating a divine light. It was the vibrant and live image. It was not just an ordinary clay image. It was not just an ordinary image which was being worshipped. It was a live deity which was being worshipped in that house, which otherwise was in such a bad condition. And then Sri Ramakrishna also gave the examples of several other devotees. When one of the devotees who had come to meet Sri Ramakrishna, he gave an example of the Amir of Afghanistan, Yaqub Khan. A great devotee himself, Yaqub Khan, he had to suffer to a great extent when he was dethroned, when that Yaqub Khan was deposed of his position of being Amir of Afghanistan. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, this always happens with the devotees. What is new in that? Then Sri Ramakrishna gave the examples of that a great devotee, Kalu Veer, who has been mentioned in Chandi written by Kavi Kankan. This Kalu Veer, great devotee of Divine Mother, he had no end of sufferings. He was taken to prison, a heavy stone was placed on his chest as a matter of punishment. He had to undergo all that trouble, all that suffering, although being a great devotee. Then Sri Ramakrishna gave another example of another great devotee by name Srimanta. Srimanta, who was born with the boon of the Divine Mother. He had no end of sufferings. His mother was also a great devotee. In spite of that, Srimanta was almost being beheaded as a punishment. But he was survived, but he underwent all that suffering. Then Sri Ramakrishna also spoke about that woodcutter who had a special privilege of receiving the grace of the Divine Mother. He was a great lover of Divine Mother. And Divine Mother herself had appeared before him. She had appeared before him, given him the vision, and showed him much grace and love. But this woodcutter had no end of suffering. It was not that just because Divine Mother was so pleased to him that his life suddenly became very comfortable, very cushy, and absolutely no struggle at all. No way. He had to struggle. He had to undergo the sufferings. He had to undergo the pains. He had to continue with his business of cutting the wood, taking it to the market, get the earnings, whatever he received, and somehow maintain himself and his family. So that was another example that Sri Ramakrishna gave. And finally, Sri Ramakrishna also gave the example of none other than Devaki, the mother of Sri Krishna. The mother of Sri Krishna who suffered so much. in the prison of her own brother. Her own brother Kamsa had put Devaki and Vasudeva in prison and tormented their lives, killing 7 of her children, newborn children, just born children. That much of suffering Devaki had to undergo, seeing 7 of her newborn children being killed by her own brother, because there was a divine announcement that the 8th child of Devaki will destroy Kamsa, will be the reason for his death. And Kamsa did not want to take any chance. So 7 of Devaki's children were not spared from death by Kamsa. He got them killed. But Sri Krishna, the 8th child, with the divine intervention, of course, he was the great avatar himself. He was the great incarnation himself. With the divine intervention, somehow Vasudeva took him out of that prison and placed Krishna with Nanda and Yashoda in Vrindavan. So this is the suffering that even Devaki had to undergo. And then Sri Ramakrishna says finally, now why this happens with the devotees? As a rule, in fact, almost all the devotees, they have to undergo suffering. And it is not that the non-devotees don't undergo. They also undergo. Every being, living being has to undergo suffering, whether devotee or not. But for devotees, the quota allocated for suffering is much more compared to others, because they don't consider it as a suffering. They consider it as the gift of the Lord, gift of the Divine Mother, as the blessing of the Divine Mother. And they know that they have to repay back the karmas that they have done in the past lives. So Sri Ramakrishna now gives this explanation why devotees suffer. The truth is, one must reap the results of prarabdha karma. Whatever karmas we do in our previous births, it is not that we only keep on doing the good karmas. Even the incarnations, at times they have to do some kind of negative karmas, and that gets accumulated in the book of accounts. The book of accounts take into account both the positive and the negative karmas, both the good and the bad karmas. Whatever good karmas we do, we get salvation for that. But whatever bad karmas we do, we have to pay for it, either in this life or maybe in the lives hereafter. The body remains as long as the results of past actions do not completely wear away. Till the time our last karma is not removed from that book of accounts, till that time we have to undergo this coming and going, coming and going, coming and going, the repeated births and deaths. It is only when the last of the karma is striked away, when that line is put, karma is over, then is the time for our salvation, for our liberation. The body remains as long as the results of past actions do not completely wear away. The results of past action have to be completely torn, have to be completely destroyed, and then we come out of that cycle of birth and death. And then Sri Ramakrishna gives here a very nice example. He says, once a blind man bathed in the Ganges and as a result was freed from all the sins. Now Ganges, Mother Ganga, is most purifying of all the things in this creation. Take a bath in Mother Ganges and you are freed from all the sins. So this blind man went to Ganges to free himself of all the defects. So what happened thereafter taking bath in the Ganges? But his blindness remained the same. The karma, the sins were wiped out. But the blindness remained the same. That Mother Ganges also could not cure that blind man of his blind sight. His sins were all cleared off. So this is what happens. We have to bear our karmas. We have to repay our karmas. We have to repay our prarabdha. this way or that way. And that's why this amount of suffering for the devotees. It was because of his evil deeds, the past birth, that he had to undergo that affliction. Because of the evil deeds in the past birth, he had to suffer in this life with the blindness. We all have to suffer because of the evil deeds, because of the bad actions that we must have done in the past. Whatever we do in the present, the bad actions, the evil actions, we have to reap the fruits of that. We cannot absolve ourselves from those misdeeds, from those bad deeds, from those sinful deeds. We can get rid of the sin, no doubt, by chanting the name of the Lord. But to repay these karmas, that we cannot avoid. We have to, we have to suffer, we have to uh, face that misery, we have to face that grief. But the devotees of the Lord, the devotees of the Mother, they undergo this phase of suffering with name of the God on their name, on their lips. Chanting the name of the divine, they happily undergo this suffering. For them, this suffering is no suffering at all. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, however much a bhakta may experience physical joy and sorrow, he always has knowledge and a treasure of divine love. Whatever sorrows, whatever pain, whatever suffering a bhakta, a devotee might be undergoing, the divine love in his heart is ever present. Nobody can take away that divine love that the bhakta has in his heart for his deity, for his beloved divine mother, for his beloved Lord. That love nobody can take away. And because of that divine love, the bhakta happily undergoes all the suffering. And the best example of this kind of forbearance or undergoing suffering and still getting on with whatever has come to our lot. The best example for this we find in the scriptures is that of the Pandavas. That example now Sri Ramakrishna is giving. This treasure of divine love never leaves the devotees. Take the Pandava brothers for instance. Now Sri Ramakrishna is giving this example of Pandava brothers themselves. Pandava brothers whose constant companion was Sri Krishna, the Lord incarnate. Pandavas were always in the misery, were always in the suffering, were always in the grief. The bad times never stopped following them, one after the other. They lost that game of dice and they had to undergo the 12 years of vanavasa. 12 years of vanavas and 1 year of agyatavas, 1 year of living incognito, that they had to hide themselves being recognized by anyone as their Pandavas. 1 year after the 12 years of exile in the forest, they had to remain incognito. They never, if anybody would have known them as their Pandavas, again they had to undergo this suffering of 12 years of exile in forest and again 1 year of living incognito, living in agyatavas. Nobody should have known, nobody should have recognized them to be Pandavas during that 1 year. So much trouble they underwent. Even after they completed these 13 years, 12 years of exile and 1 year of living incognito, when they came back, the Kauravas didn't even agree to give the piece of their property, the piece of their kingdom. Nothing doing. So much suffering Pandavas underwent, although constantly being accompanied by their friend, philosopher, guide, Lord Krishna, the Lord incarnate himself. Though they suffered so many calamities, they did not lose their God consciousness even once. They underwent so much of suffering. Nobody in this creation underwent suffering like the Pandavas. That is for sure. Even Rama, for that matter, Lord Rama, he underwent suffering when Sita was taken away by Ravana. But the suffering of the Pandavas, there is no equal measure to the suffering that they underwent. And in spite of that, they always carried the God consciousness within them. They always carried the love for their divine Lord Krishna within them. They never said, oh, Krishna being my friend, Krishna being my relative, Krishna being my supporter, how can I undergo all this suffering? Krishna, are you doing right? Are you doing wrong? They never questioned that the divinity of Krishna. They always carried the divine love for their divine deity in their hearts, within them all the time. That much was their confidence, that much was their bhakti, that much was their devotion. Where can you find men like him, like them? Sri Ramakrishna asks. Can you find men like Pandavas anywhere? In spite of undergoing so much of suffering for 13 long years, and even after that, even after winning the war of Mahabharata, Pandavas' suffering never stopped. They lost all their future generations except Parikshit. The entire next generation of Pandavas was wiped out during this war of Mahabharata. But they never lost their divine love. Where can you find men like them endowed with so much knowledge of devotion? Because they had that faith in Lord Krishna. Whatever is happening is His will. Why should we cry? Why should we disrespect Krishna on account of our suffering? It is all His will. And they accepted whatever sufferings came to their lot. So that is the difference between suffering of a devotee and suffering of an ordinary person, of an ordinary householder, or even ordinary jiva for that matter. For an ordinary jiva, suffering is, oh my God, it is all doom. But for the devotees, suffering is God's gift. So what? This thing bad is happening to me. That will also pass. That is also my mother's blessing to me. That is my mother's grace to me. That is how the devotees, they excel themselves in facing the tough times, in facing the difficult times, in facing the times of suffering, because for them even suffering is no suffering at all. They always carry that divine light inside. They always carry that divine love inside. This is the great teaching Sri Ramakrishna has given to us through his experience of telling about the Malik family in Calcutta whom he had visited. That is how devotees excel themselves, by never extinguishing the divine light in their heart, in spite of great amount of suffering, in spite of great amount of misery, in spite of great amount of calamity. The divine light keeps burning in their heart of hearts. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Jai Thakur, Jai Ma, Jai Swamiji.